brace yourself or take a seat. The train will sometimes jerk when we start to move.
Okay, hold on.
So hang on.
It jerked.
You can't say I didn't warn you. Now, as we start back down the mountain today, you'll notice the brakemen moving into action at the end of each car. Brakemen help regulate the speed of the train and the smoothness of the ride, and they keep the cars from banging into one another as we travel back down the mountain. We're going to be doing this all the way back down the mountain to Cass today, and from time to time, you'll notice the brakemen leaning out over the side of the train and looking underneath the train. But when you see this, there's no reason to be concerned. They're just looking at the wheels to make sure they're still rolling. Now, I know it sounds funny, but because we're turning the brake wheels just as hard as we can, it is possible, in fact, it's inevitable, that the wheels will lock up from time to time where they're no longer rolling. They're just sliding on the rails. If the wheels slide for very far, it causes them to get a flat spot. And we don't want that, so we'll keep a very close watch on the wheels as we travel back down the mountain. Also, the brakemen keep a close watch on one another, and they communicate back and forth using hand signals. That way, not more than one brakeman at a time will take his or her brake off. When a wheel locks up and begins to slide on the rails, it's not a huge deal. We'll just loosen the brake wheel up just a little bit at a time, just until that wheel breaks free and starts to roll again. Then we'll tighten the brake wheel right back down so the train doesn't gain a lot of speed and get out of control. And again, we'll only do this one person at a time, so only one brake will be off at any given time. Train is now transitioning from downhill to uphill. And if you watch towards the front of the train, you'll notice the brakemen taking their brakes off, moving back through the train accordingly. And I'll be the last one to take my brakes off as my car is the last one to start uphill. By doing this, we're able to keep the entire train stretched out. Because between each car on the train, there's about 1 foot of slack. So in our train today, we have about 5 feet of slack. And we don't want that slack running in and out at will. So we'll do our best to keep the train stretched out just as much as possible going down the mountain today. Now, while we're going uphill, I have a little break from braking. But of course, by now, you probably realized braking doesn't keep me from talking. But I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you about my favorite book that was written about Cass. There have been several books written about Cass, and I've probably read most of them. That's where I learned everything that I talk about on the train. So if you'd like to learn more about Cass and more about some of the things that I've talked about today, then I highly recommend this book to you. The book is called On Beyond Leatherbark, a Cass saga written by Roy B. Clarkson, and you can find it in the deep directly across from us here to our left. You'll notice that over on that mountainside there's a bunch of dead trees. Those dead trees are hemlock trees. Around here we have this tiny little insect called the hemlock woolly adelgid, which is slowly killing all of our hemlock trees. There's some places nearby where the entire mountainside is completely dead, and there's not even one living tree. it became a rare thing to see a healthy hemlock tree because of the woolly adelgid. You can see a few of them over there that are still alive, and a couple of them that's up here next to the tracks, especially next to this next curve. But if you look at the ones that's closer to the train here, and you see the white that's on the limbs, that's not lichen or moss. That's the larva of the woolly adelgid, which is slowly killing those trees, and in the next few short years, these trees will be dead as well. The woolly adelgid is an invasive species from Asia. And over in Asia, they have the woolly adelgid, but they don't have quite as big a problem with it there as we do here, because they also have another insect called the black lady beetle, which feeds on the larva of the woolly adelgid and helps keep it under control. So just recently, they started an experiment where they started to release black lady beetles into some northeastern states, and they've had quite a lot of success with that. So hopefully someday soon they'll start to release those into our forest as well, so our hemlock trees can start to recover, because the hemlock woolly adelgid has really put a hurt on West Virginia and other surrounding states. Red spruce trees. Gardenier Knob is only about 20 miles north of Cass on Route 92-250. Now, the only reason why Gardenier Knob survived and nothing else did was because one lumber company thought that another lumber company owned it, and vice versa. It was a surveying mistake, and neither one of them cut it, and it still stands today. And today, Gardenier Knob is a national forest, so it will probably never be cut. But if you ever have a chance to go to Gardenier Knob, it's definitely worth the trip. I highly recommend it. It was a life-changing experience for me. How you get there is really easy. For one thing, you can punch it into your GPS. On your GPS, it'll say Gardenier Knob Recreational Area. That'll take you right where I'm talking about, the old-growth red spruce trees. But if you're old-fashioned, when you leave Cass, you go west on Route 66 to the end of the road, 5 miles from Cass, then turn left on Route 92-250, heading north towards Elkins. And you'll stay on that road the whole way. You'll go through several towns like Greenbank, Arborvale, Boyer, Bartow, and eventually you'll go through a town called Durbin. You'll go all the way through Durbin, and then you'll start driving up Cheat Mountain. And when you get to the top of Cheat Mountain, there'll be a big, long, straight stretch. You can't miss it. It's the only straight stretch on the whole mountain. In that straight stretch, there's a sign that says Gardenier Knob. Gaudineer. Gardenier. Turn right, you go out of Forest Service Road for about 5-10 minutes, and you're there. And believe me, when you get there, you'll know you're there, because it looks unlike anything you've ever seen before. You'll really be able to get a good understanding of just how impassable the forest was when man first come around here, and just how big those trees were, and how much dead stuff and debris was on the ground from all the forest that had growed up and fell down over time. Again, I highly recommend going there. Gardenier Knob. It's a pure stand of old-growth red spruce trees, and it's also one of the highest peaks in West Virginia, only a few feet shorter than Bald Knob. It's either the 3rd or 4th highest peak. North of Durbin, on the top of Cheat Mountain, on Route 92-250, Gardenier Knob. Now, in just a moment, we're going to be stopping the train once again. This time, we're stopping at Whitaker. And you're welcome to get off the train here at Whitaker and stretch your legs. Now, we won't be at Whitaker quite as long as we were at Bald Knob, but you're still welcome to get off the train here and get soaking wet. When you get off the train, directly in front of the train will be the concession stand where you can get popcorn, hot dogs, nachos, ice cream, coffee, hot chocolate, something cold to drink. Pretty much anything a normal concession stand has, they have it. Halfway across the field is the restrooms, and on the far side of the field is an old logging camp set up, which is an example of what the loggers lived in when they worked up on the mountain. There's also a camp car over there, which is a kitchen car, exactly like what my great-grandfather worked in. And also the logging equipment like the skidder and the log loader and the fire tower, that's all on the far side of the field. But if you want to go to the logging camp and the logging equipment, I suggest going there first, because there's a lot to take in a short amount of time. Just like before, when you get off the train, please use only the steps the brakeman let down.
Uh-oh. Yeah. Please sit.
Now, some of you may have had a chance to check out the fire tower while we were here at Whitaker. But in case you didn't, you can see the fire tower for the next little bit as we go down around this next curve. Fire towers is something else that I have a lot of interest in. And I know a lot about fire towers. I could probably go on all day long just about fire towers. But I won't. But I do want to tell you a little bit about them because the fire towers played a very important role in West Virginia's history. And they can also be directly linked to the logging that happened here. When the loggers went through West Virginia, they cut down every single tree standing. And they left behind a lot of stumps. But something else that they left behind was all of the tree limbs, which they cut off of the trees, and all of the tree tops, which were cut out of the trees and left on the ground to dry out and eventually become a prime source for forest fires. And the forest fires did happen, hundreds of them all across the state, especially in the 1930s. In fact, in the 1930s, over 80% of West Virginia's surface was burnt in forest fires. Over 80% of the state's surface was burnt in the 1930s, so we knew something had to be done to change that. And for the fire towers, and also for the CCC boys. The CCC boys were a young group of adolescent teenagers from all over the country. Some of them were from troubled backgrounds, but others were just doing their part to help avoid going off to war. The CCC boys' main job was to fight forest fires. But when they weren't fighting forest fires, they were building our state park, which we still enjoy today. The CCC boys also built the fire towers, hundreds of them all across the state. The fire towers were located 16 miles apart on the highest mountain peak. Because each fire tower can see approximately 8 miles in any direction, so they located them 16 miles apart so they could cover the entire surface of West Virginia. The fire towers were manned by tower men and tower women. Some of them were paid, but others were volunteers, but even when they were paid, they were paid very little. Another important person back then was called the fire warden. The fire warden was a very important person and an easily recognizable character. Back then, if there was a forest fire burning nearby, but they needed more manpower to help fight that fire, the fire warden could come right up to you and say, "I summoned you to go fight fires." And you would have to go. Otherwise, you could go to jail. But between the fire wardens and the fire towers and the CCC boys and the tower men and women who man the fire towers, it very much helped our forest fire situation here in West Virginia. And over the next 10 years, through the 1940s, less than 10,000 acres burned in the state. It was a dramatic improvement over the 80% of the state's surface which burned in the 1930s. So it was obvious that the plan worked. The fire towers continued to be manned for another 50 years to come, all the way up until the 1980s, until they slowly phased them out and started using airplanes to look for fires. So the fire towers have slowly become a thing of the past, and some of our younger generations may never know of their importance. It's become sort of a romantic side of history. Never again will there be a time where there was someone up in those fire towers watching down over us and watching over our forest to ensure they were there for future generations. A lot of the fire towers have been taken down or simply fell down from disrepair, and there are very few fire towers left standing today. But on this train ride, if you have been looking in the right place at the right time, you could have seen as many as 5 fire towers. But that's actually quite a rare thing. Guys, here's that tree again, which is half locust, half maple, but one stump. It's a black sugar loco maple, right above the train. Now there's one more thing I'm going to say about the fire towers, and that's nearby. There's a fire tower which I highly recommend that you check out. This fire tower is at Seneca State Forest. Seneca State Forest is about 15-20 minutes south of Cass. And at Seneca State Forest, they have a fire tower, but what makes their fire tower so special is they have fixed it up. And now they rent it out like a hotel room for people to stay overnight in the fire tower, just like we do with the caboose at Bald Knob. So maybe the next time you come to West Virginia, you can stay overnight in a fire tower 100 feet off the ground. Then come ride the train and stay overnight in the Bald Knob caboose, the highest train destination east of the Mississippi River. That could make for quite an experience. Over the hill from the switchback, you'll see a waterfall on the Leatherbark Run. It's about a 12 to 15 foot waterfall. Now, it is quite hard to get a picture of it because of all of the trees that's in between us and the waterfall, but you can see it plainly from the train, especially after we change directions. Now, when we get up here closer to the switch, you'll see a big boulder that's up here next to the tracks. And if you look directly over the hill from that boulder on the right side, you'll see the waterfall on the Leatherbark Run.
Right down there.
Pretty hard to see.
Yeah. You hear it though.
Yeah.
keep a lookout for deer between here and the depot down at Cass. We see a lot of deer this time of evening, especially in the thicker parts of forest and the taller grasses. So watch for deer between here and the depot down at Cass. To go. Or maybe I should say, woo-hoo. The stream that you see flowing alongside the tracks, like I said earlier, that's called Leatherbark Run, named after the leatherwood shrub. Most people don't realize this, but Leatherbark Run is actually chock full of fish. The fish that live in this stream are called native brook trout, or natives, or brookies, or fingerlings, like they call them around here, because they don't get very big, only about the size of your finger, the average one, the biggest one being 10 to 12 inches long. Although they're little, they have a big taste. If you ever eat a native brook trout, you'll never want to eat any other fish again. They're that good. The native brook trout have always been in this stream. They've never been introduced by man. They are native to this stream and many other streams like that in West Virginia. The native brook trout only live in the cleanest, coldest, unpolluted waters. So, of course, Leatherbark Run is perfect for them. Pocahontas County is a fisherman's paradise. In fact, sometimes it's referred to as the birthplace of rivers because 8 different rivers get their start right here in Pocahontas County, and there's not a single river flowing in. All the water starts right here in Pocahontas County, the birthplace of rivers. just a moment, as we cross these two bridges just ahead, you have a pretty good chance of seeing some of those native brook trout that I was telling you about. Down here next to the locomotive repair shop area, you'll notice there's several locomotives that are still under steam, with smoke coming out of the smokestacks. That's because here at Cass, we keep our engines fired up around the clock 24/7. There's almost never an occasion where we don't have an engine ready to go. Because from a cold engine, in order to get a fire built in the firebox and get the boiler pressure up to 200 pounds per square inch, it takes 24 to 36 hours from a cold engine to a ready engine. So we keep our engines ready around the clock 24/7, and there's always someone here to take care of those engines day and night. Keep coal shoveling in the firebox and water in the boiler. That way when we come in the mornings, Kenny will only have to spend 30 minutes or so to get his fire ready and get the boiler pressure back up to 200, then we're ready to go up the mountain. If you look on the right-hand side of the train here, on the other side of the passenger cars, you'll see another Shay locomotive. This one is Shay 7. And when you see Shay 7, you'll be able to tell it has definitely seen better days. But believe it or not, Shay 7 is not too far gone yet. There are plans to one day restore Shay 7 to operating condition. All it needs is a new boiler. Also on the right, you'll see the largest collection of steel boxcars in the world. A lot of railroads scrapped these boxcars out long ago. But here at Cass, we use them for storage. Also on the right is a locomotive under a tarp that is a Climax engine, which is another example of a geared logging locomotive like the Shay. That's a 50-ton, 2-truck Climax, the Durban Rocket No. 3 from Durban, which came here for repair work. Also on the right is Shay 5, the oldest operating Shay locomotive in the entire world. It's been here at Cass its whole life since 1905. It's our state locomotive and the pride of Cass. Behind Shay 5 is Shay 11, our second biggest Shay here at Cass. Second only to Big 6, the biggest one in the world. Behind Shay 11 is Shay 4, the little engine that could. Yes, that was a true story. Stopping here for a moment to allow the locomotive to take on water one more time. But while we sit here, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you for riding the train with us today.
Well, gotta say goodbye to this place. And yeah, here's the bedroom. One of the bedrooms.